Corruption in boxing. I'm back. Let's talk a little Sergey Kovalev against Eleider Storm Alvarez. Pretty good fight this Saturday for the WBO Light Heavyweight World Championship. One of the best cases of boxing redemption in many a year. You know, Sergey Kovalev defied the critics, defied the boxing fraternity, defied the bookmakers. I think pretty much everybody had written him off after, how many defeats is that now? 2 controversial against Andre Ward, and then the first fight against Eleider Alvarez, 36 years old. You know, his lifestyle has been berated to such an extent. You know, his drinking, which is well documented. You know, rumors has it he was downing like half a bottle of vodka, you know, sometimes a couple of beers, you know, straight after a training camp. But he departed from the trainer who was training Fazlidin Gaib Nazarov, you know, the gold medalist from Rio, who I mentioned straight away when they linked up that it was a bad match. You know, Fazlidin is a very different fighter, so I didn't see any dividends with that. So Sergey linked up with you know, Buddy McGirt, you know, who also has been quite sort of anonymous in the last couple of years. But Buddy McGirt was a good choice because Buddy McGirt was a very good defensive fighter, and those attributes were definitely incorporated in Sergey Kovalev's performance in this fight. You know, I mean, generally when the outcome of a first fight is not marred by any sort of controversy, i.e. it was a decisive victory for one of the fighters, as it was in the first fight. You know, there was 3 knockdowns, and if you watch the 3rd knockdown, Sergey Kovalev was struggling to get up, so that was as conclusive as a victory can be. You know, what happened up until the knockdowns, well, that can be a little bit subjective. Some people think Kovalev was winning the fight, but Alvarez was having better success in the first fight. 2 punches in particular, his jab and his left hand to the body. I felt he was slowly breaking down Kovalev, and he was very comfortable when Kovalev decided to mount quite an assault. I think it was in the 4th or 5th round. But we saw what happened at the end of the round. Alvarez was comfortable. He'd managed to block and parry a lot of Sergey's artillery, you know, letting his hands go. He was firing off a number of combinations. I felt it was more in sort of desperation to try and command, you know, get a foothold in the fight. But Alvarez almost smiled and started landing some punches at the end of the round. So I felt straight away that Alvarez was very comfortable. He'd ridden the storm, and hence, you know, he'd almost won the psychological battle. And we saw what happened. Kovalev tried a jab. The recoil didn't bring his left hand back to protect the left hand side of his jab, and Alvarez come back with a long straight right hand, and Kovalev never recovered it after that fight. But in this fight, a total different transformation. Kovalev exercised his rematch clause almost immediately. Now that's a very good sign from a psychological stance. You know, Kovalev wanted to remediate, you know, whatever errors or deficiencies that he felt took place in the first fight. But a lot of people were very critical, saying that Kovalev once again is making a lot of excuses. But given such dominance and such a reversal of the first performance, maybe there is some justification to what Kovalev was doing, because quite clearly you rarely do you get a transformation like that, certainly from a guy who's in his later 30s. So Kovalev, I think he had a very good training camp as well. He looked quite refreshed, revitalized. there seemed to be a very good affiliation between him and McGirt. I could detect a lot of mutual respect, and that is good, because Kovalev has a tendency, and I'm only speculating, of not listening to his trainers, relying on sort of natural skill and ability. But in this particular training camp, I think Buddy McGirt, he didn't tolerate any of Kovalev's misdemeanors. I don't think he tolerated any drinking whatsoever, because he must have realized what Kovalev, may have had an addiction in the past or have some sort of a drinking problem. But discipline was the key, and I think Buddy must have tied him down, got him into a very good regime, got him in good shape, very good conditioning, working on Kovalev's stamina, which has always been one of his deficiencies. Kovalev has a tendency of tiring, and that's natural with somebody who moves around as much as him. He sort of bounces up and down, throws a lot of punches as a pressure fighter, but he's loading up, and when he's loading up and he's missing sometimes, then we know that has a tendency of really draining your energy. So Kovalev in this fight, he came out re-establishing his jab, firing off a lot of jabs, and the key in this fight was that Kovalev kept pushing Eleider Alvarez to his right. Kovalev was pivoting, keeping distance very well, circling to Eleider Alvarez's left hand side, which means he's taken away his straight long right hand. And if Alvarez is trying to fire his jab without oscillating his body, then his feet are going to cross. And he's also taking away his jab. Alvarez has to keep rotating, has to keep turning to his left to try and re-establish that jab. By that time, Kovalev could be bouncing on his feet and firing a right, shifting to his left, and then re-firing a straight right hand as he was doing. So Alvarez really didn't have any confidence in this fight. His punch output was minimized. He was coming forward behind a high guard. And this is the key. Whenever you have guys behind a high guard, what is the best thing to do? And that is fire punches in bunches. Preoccupy the fighter. Because one thing that Eleider Alvarez doesn't do, he does not repel firepower. He doesn't trade punches. He doesn't punch with the opponent, nor does he try and punch in between the punches of his opponent. Sometimes he'll try and use a bit of memory and think that Kovalev only fired 3 punches during the last exchange. So on the third punch, he'll fire a loopy sort of right hand to try and get around Kovalev's guard. Use more accuracy, use more single punches to try and disrupt, the crusher. But Kovalev, took the punches quite well. And it was quite bizarre in this fight because the roles are almost reversed. Kovalev was the boxer, Alvarez was the puncher. And the commentators, were really elucidating this point. So it was quite bizarre knowing that, Kovalev has always been a puncher, an intimidating, exerting intimidation on his opponents. But that sort of montage may have now become dissipated given his recent defeats, and given that he's a lot older now. So I think he did the wise thing. He took the power off his punching, and he was even able to shoe shine in this punch. He was triple jabbing, sometimes double jabbing, right hand, coming back with the left hook, and then finishing off with a right hand to the body, then spinning off, keeping that distance, and that was the key. Not coming too inside, not allowing Eleider Alvarez to work, Kovalev's body, from the early rounds. So Kovalev was fantastic. He outboxed him, he outfought him, he was the ring general, kept pushing Eleider Alvarez to his right, and that is one of Alvarez's weakness if you watch previous fights, like against Isaac Chilemba, where I think he was marginally outboxed and beaten in that fight as well. Kovalev, the shoe shining, I was amazed with his ability, and that's a good thing as well, because he wasn't loading up on his punches too much. It was about, landing the targets, trying to create openings to the body by preoccupying Alvarez up top and vice versa. You know, try and punch through the guard with some of the punches, try and set up even for the uppercut. You know, when guys are in the high guard, you know, when they lean forward so their head is above their front foot, then the one punch they're open to is the uppercut, and we saw that a couple of times. So Kovalev's punch selection was very good, and given that he was taking punches off, he was taking power off his punches, not loading up too much, so he was able to sustain his efforts. And that combined with his, you know, bouncy sort of footwork, you know, moving it around the wing, you know, he showed very good endurance in this fight. You know, I was extremely impressed. I admit it, I've been a harsh critic of, you know, Kovalev in the past, because I'd watched him as an amateur and I didn't really see any of that in, you know, once he turned professional. You know, HBO was more concerned with him being a perceived killer, which literally he was, and that was the way they were marketing him. That's the way, you know, he was fighting. I don't think he was utilizing his boxing ability. Against Andre Ward, he showed deficiencies, certainly at short range, trying to use more energy to try and, you know, apply a vice-like grip around Andre Ward and wrestle him to the ropes, rather than trying to learn how to fight out of a clinch. You know, trying to, which Andre Ward is, you know, is a master of, and that's one lesson that Ward taught him in, you know, in the first fight. Although Kovalev, you know, boxed very well, and the outcome of that fight is, you know, people have different opinions, but, you know, Sergey Kovalev won that fight. You know, don't think there's no doubt in that. And the second fight, you know, definitely was marred by controversy. You know, there was definitely low blows in that fight. You know, that's beyond dispute. That's not a subjective point of view there. You know, when a guy has his trunks above his belly button at the start, when the referee is indicating what is a low blow, what is legal and what is illegal, and during the fight, you know, the position of his trunks, you know, is no longer, you know, above his belly button. It's now down with, you know, a little bit of perspiration and sort of, you know, movement, etc. So the parameters for what is a low blow and an, you know, a legal and a legal and an illegal blow has changed. So that's what the referee really didn't grasp, nor did the wider boxing public. So, you know, there was a mix of borderline and low blows, but the harder concussive blows were definitely low. And Sergey Kovalev clearly should have been allowed up to 5 minutes to recover. So that was a grave error of the referee. But that's water under the bridge now. You know, Kovalev is now once again a 3-time world champion. Unified once, then he got back the WBO and the IBO when he fought for the vacant belt. Lost that belt against Alvarez, you know, and then has recaptured it. You know, whether a third fight will transpire between the two, I'm unsure. You know, rubber match, maybe Alvarez and, you know, whoever provokes him, Yvonne, Michelle, maybe they can. Because I think the first fight was a voluntary defense, so a rematch clause was inserted. So once again, there, man, we you know, the benefits of a rematch clause there. You know, Sergey Kovalev, you know, if it was a mandatory challenger, he wouldn't have been entitled to a rematch. Maybe he would have retired. So in this fight, the pressure was on Kovalev, people. If he'd lost, everybody would have been calling for his head. Maybe he would have thought, well, that's about it now. You know, 37 years old. Am I going to get any better? But he defied everybody, as I mentioned from the start. You know, the pressure was on him. He fought. You know, he regulated all of the forces against him, and you know, he put on a magnificent display. Very impressed against a dangerous fighter, a big light heavyweight as well, Eleider Alvarez. A very good timer. Maybe his punch output is constrained, but he's relying on big punches. You know, maybe he underestimated Sergey Kovalev as well. Thought maybe I can bide my time. I'll get him eventually. Maybe he tried to do a Deontay Wilder and thinking that I can take rounds off, and then eventually I'm gonna nail this sucker with my right hand. You know, the way he capitulated in the first fight, there's no way he's going to be able to recover from sort of the punches in this fight. So maybe Alvarez did that. You know, I could hear Mark Ramsey, and my French is not bad. I could understand what he was saying. The commentators were saying that there was no urgency in the corner. Yes, there was. Mark Ramsey was definitely getting pissed off. He was getting disillusioned with what Alvarez was doing, and he was trying to really rev up his guy to get out there and start letting his hands go. And that's what Ramsey was saying from the 6th round. So don't know what the fuck these commentators are talking about, unless they're conversant in French. Then different story. But Sergey, what does he go next? You know, at the end of the fight, he was talking about, you know, unifications now, and it has to be big fights now. Time is not on his side. You know, he's got a lot of, you know, debts to settle with. You know, Artur Beterbiev, who beat him twice in the amateurs, or may have been. I think they fought 4 times. I know they fought more than twice. But they had some good rivalries. You know, Beterbiev had the chance of fighting Kovalev before, but Beterbiev was the one who declined those opportunities. Nothing to do with Kovalev. So Beterbiev now has a belt, no excuse. He's in his mid-30s. That'll be a good fight. You know, Beterbiev carries a lot more power. You know, I think Sergey Kovalev is now transitioning more into a sort of a boxer, very good ring general. Maybe the power has gone a little bit. You know, I didn't really see it in this fight. He landed more than sufficient punches on Eleider Alvarez to have tried to buzzed him up. But one thing I did notice at the end of the fight, Kovalev's jabs and his right hands were snapping Alvarez's head back. So had that fight gone 13, 14, 15, Alvarez quite possibly would have been stopped, or at least knocked down. I think his punch resistance was slowly breaking at the end of the fight. You could clearly see it. He was shipping too much punishment. Generally, he did have very good defense during the fight. You know, that high guard, chin tucked down. He does block a lot of punches. It's a very dangerous trying to defense when you're not trying to slip or slide. You're utilizing more on your peekaboo type of guard to block punches, and that's about it. You know, that you have to be. It has to be quite a robust, you know, non-porous type of guard, and he does a good job. So Kovalev with his boxing ability, yeah, I think he can be more than competitive against Dmitry Bivol and against Beterbiev as well. You know, those would be very good fights. You know, Russia, you know, Central Asia now, you know, has a monopoly on the light heavyweight title. You know, Anthony Yarde from the United Kingdom is slowly becoming in a position to fight for that championship, and Alexander Vodzik as well, Marcus Brown. So we got some good players. You know, Brown had an opportunity of fighting Kovalev before, I think, but he pulled it out of that fight. Not sure whether it was an injury or, you know, whether, you know, he just shit himself. Probably the latter. But we'll see, man. You know, Kovalev, you know, extending his career. Good to see, you know. He's a character. You know, I'm not going to pass judgment on what transpired outside the ring. You know, that's why we have judges and juries to adjudicate on that. You know, if the prosecutors and the defense attorneys want to send me the casework, I'll be more than happy to review and then, you know, pass judgment on him. But I've got no inclination of what happened, no information. You know, a lot of it generally speculation, word of mouth. You know, so we'll let the courts decide on that. But you know, let's separate boxing from politics. There's a little bit too much of that, too much racism as well. You know, let's just appreciate fighters for what they've done, And let's hope even the LDBC community can heap praise on Sergey Kovalev, because he certainly warrants it. You know, put aside your psychotically racist and robotic tendencies and give this man credit. You know, I am doing so, and I've been one of his harshest critics. You know, a fantastic performance. You know, one of the best cases of redemption in recent boxing memory for me. So big up the Crusher. Corruption in boxing. Sayonara.